Almost everything we just talked about, you guys, gun policy, background checks, banning assault weapons, are rendered pretty much obsolete with the advent of this new technology. Richard, how will possession and regulation be affected when people are able to print 3D guns in their own homes?
Well, I'm sure that the world's terrorists are going to shiver knowing that the Congress has passed an extension of the law. That's certainly going to prevent them from developing a plastic gun. I certainly understand it in terms of general application, but you can't be a Luddite about this whole thing. Technology is going to go where technology goes, and we need to counter technology with new technology. When it comes to the metal powders, well, the metal powder is going to show up in a magnetometer walking through an airport, and both of the guns show up certainly in X-rays. It's the magnetometer is the issue with the all plastic guns. So technology always responds to technology, and I'm sure we will keep up being able to prevent guns from being accessed on planes.
Jill, do you agree?
I can't say I can predict the technologic future at this point. I think, as Leah was saying, we really have to ask what kind of a society do we want to be, and do we want to keep pushing the envelope for more guns in more places, filling more homes and schools and basements and the world, and militarizing our foreign policy. I think we've really reached the limits of this. And, to your point before about poverty and the connection, we just passed a budget last week, which, in which half of our discretionary expenditures are going to this militarized foreign policy, to the military, which is not making us safer, which in fact is making us less safe, as we've seen, with drone policies, and seeing the people of Afghanistan and Pakistan and Yemen
Jill, good
really
point.
poisoned against us. So, I think it's really important to step back, and instead of having a policy and an economy of austerity and of militarization and weaponization, we need to really assert, as good people of this country and the world, we need to assert the kind of vision that we need, an economy, communities that are safe and that are,
Ben, you have about 30
really
seconds
have a better
before we
vision
move on.
for the future.
Okay, let me just jump in real quick. And I would say this, I agree with Jill and what she's saying too about, this increased military. The bottom line is you can save far more innocent people from violence by taking away some of the weapons from our government than you can from disarming the citizenry. And certainly around the world we see that happening, as we have killed so many people over the last 10 years who are war on terror, who are innocent people called collateral damage. By the way, on the point of 3D guns, yeah, the technology is here, it's developing, but it rarely works. I mean, most of those guns, they don't work at all. Eventually the technology will catch up, but right now, I mean, it's a lot more hype than it is actual reality of a useful piece of technology.
Throughout this debate, we've encouraged
I think it's interesting the National Rifle Association has been quiet about it.
Leah, 1 second. Throughout this debate, we've encouraged you guys, the viewers, to share your thoughts with us on Twitter. So for a look at some of the questions you want our guest to answer, let's bring in RT correspondent Megan Lopez. Megan, thanks for coming on. What do you have for us today?
Well, as you mentioned, all day and all week, really, we have been following what's been going on and how this debate has been playing out on Twitter and also on Facebook using the hashtag gun debate. So we want to continue that conversation on gun debate. But let's go to our first question. This one comes from Bob Diaz. He writes, criminals don't obey the law. Why do you believe criminals will obey any gun control laws? Leah, I want to pose this one to you first.
Well, I wanted to say something about plastic guns first, if I could. The NRA has been very quiet about plastic guns, and I imagine if they see them as a threat because it would cut into their profit margin, into their market, then they would speak up. So they obviously they're not terribly worried about that. Yeah, this argument about criminals don't obey the laws is an old palaver that's brought out time and time again. You can buy a gun quite easily in many states in this country. You can be a straw purchaser, which means you don't have a criminal background. And criminals use straw purchasers all the time to buy guns because they can pass background checks. So they can buy guns and they pass them on to the trafficker, who then traffics them into states like New York or Connecticut or wherever the destination is. So really, that's a false argument. What you really need to look at is how do you keep the guns from getting into the wrong hands in the first place?
Richard, what do you have to say about that?
The only answer to that is to have stronger federal gun laws.
I agree, of course, with Leah on that point. That's the issue. Keeping guns out of the wrong hands. We've gone through a year of discussion on the gun issue, and I've yet to hear a member of the Congress talk about how most criminals obtain guns. The answer is they steal them. There are 500,000 stolen guns in this country every year. I hear people talking about putting their finger in the dike over there or over there, but nobody talks about the big problems involving the criminals misusing, stealing guns. There are things we could do.
Good points, both of you. Let's go ahead and move on to our next. Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. Let's go ahead and move on to our next Twitter question. I want to get as many in as possible. Dr. Sarvis tweeted, if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns and the government. Meanwhile, William M. says, what are lawmakers really doing to get guns out of criminals' hands? And why can't they write laws that don't impact lawful owners? And Ben, I want to turn this one to you. Right now, there are 300 million civilian firearms in circulation. So what do you make of those Twitter questions?
Well, no, look, those are valid questions, and that's one of the problems that we run into in this debate is that those questions are often ignored. The bottom line is that you can't write a law that essentially will apply to someone who's a lawbreaker. You can assign penalties to lawbreakers, but you can't create any law that controls someone's behavior. It only penalizes their behavior when they violate the law. And so if someone is going to commit crimes with a gun, or if they're going to obtain a gun illegally, you can't stop that through legislation. You can only punish them after the fact. And that is a harsh reality here. Look, I think everyone on this panel would agree. We all want to see the number of deaths in this country, violence in this country, whether it's gun-related or not. And let's make no mistake, there's a lot of violence in this country that is not gun-related. We want to see that not just lessened, but eliminated completely. But when lawmakers get involved and start creating legislation in order to make that happen, unfortunately, it rarely brings down crime or spares people. The reality is most of the solutions are on a community level, on a grassroots level, on people working in their communities to better them and make them safer, and not through legislation.
I want to go ahead and get some answers from you. I know the Twitter followers are eager to hear from you. Jeff K. wrote, why has this debate repeatedly excluded police from being under gun control? What do you think about that?
I'm sorry, who was that directed to?
Jeff K. That's for you, Jill.
Okay, and why are police excluded?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm not aware that they are excluded, and again, I would just point to where this is working, because we can have all kinds of hypothetical debates about what is or isn't possible. But we actually have a real example of where this worked, where it was supported by law enforcement, where it was supported by gun clubs, by professional shooter associations, and it did not strip, rights to own guns. It did not impinge on gun ownership or recreation. And this is in Australia, where basically automatic weapons were taken out of circulation, and people were able to get, and to replace them with weapons that are far safer and that cannot be used exclusively for killing people. So this can actually be solved. It saves lives. It dramatically lowered death rates from gun violence, and it dramatically lowered expenses, $500 million a year related to violence. So this can be done, and it works.
One final question, less than a minute left. Richard, I'm addressing it to you. Alec Wallace, why does the gun debate always boil down to gun violence instead of trying to fix all around violence?
Well, it's because we have a tunnel vision. When there's a gun issue, we focus on guns. The biggest mass murders in U.S. history had nothing to do with guns. They were bombs. They were a gallon of gasoline in the Bronx, the Happy Land fire.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you guys so much for participating in this Twitter kind of conversation. I'm going to hand it back to Abby now.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, you guys, for our viewers, for our thoughts. That concludes the debate, you guys, and clearly today's conversation alone is not going to solve the issue of gun violence. But this important discussion about the root causes must be had in order to prevent the thousands of gun homicides every year. So thank you to everyone who tuned in and to all of our panelists for a very thought-provoking debate. You guys keep it up. Have a great night. See you later.